lottery time in Nashville. And how'd that go?
You are Locked On A's, your daily Oakland A's podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're going to kick the dog when it's down, huh? Okay, I got it. Welcome to another episode of Locked On A's. How you doing? I'm Wayne Coy, your host here, a longtime radio dude from Oakland originally, but now living in Lost Wages, Nevada, and certainly watching what's going on with our favorite team. If you are making us your first listen every day, we thank you for that. Obviously, it's always good to get started together, and we appreciate it very much so. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's your team every day, and today is no exception. So what's going on? Well, winter meetings, of course, and the draft lottery, something brand new that we've never had to endure before, but this is year number 2. And just like last year when the A's were 60 and 102, when it came to the lottery, doesn't matter how high the odds were, they drew the number 6 pick last year. So could this year be better? That was, of course, the question. The answer is poquito? Yeah, like a little bit. But again, not in the top 3, even though they had the worst record in baseball, 50 and 112 in 2023. And what does that get you? That gets you the 4th pick in the MLB draft. Who gets the first pick? A team that almost made the playoffs. That would be the Cleveland Guardians. Unbelievable, but happy for Stephen Vogt. At the same time, I mean, it's just kind of the way you expect things to go with the A's. But before you get, I guess, too upset about that, look at it this way. Is it a win or is it a loss? Well, if you're thinking, well, we got the first pick, which means we get the choice of all choices. We can take somebody before anybody else. That comes with a price, of course. That means first pick money. And if you're John Fisher and, well, you squeak when you walk, maybe it's better to have the 4th pick so you don't have that big outlay. And you've already heard Mr. Fisher speaking publicly, actually, about, on the record, about having to, he goes, the only problem with the high draft picks is you have to pay the big money. Well, maybe not as much if you're picking 4th. I did do some research to look back and see over the years, like since the draft started, 1965, how that 4th pick has held up. And I have to tell you, some very serviceable major leaguers over the years had been picked 4th. Some of them have actually gone on to make it to the Hall of Fame. Dave Winfield, for example, was a 4th pick in the draft. Barry Larkin, 4th pick in the draft. And Thurman Munson, who by all rights ought to be in the Hall of Fame, unfortunately his life ended early, and so his statistics aren't typically what gets you into the Hall, but project how he played throughout his career all the way through. Hall of Famer. Carlton Fisk, 4th pick in the draft. See what I'm saying? So it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, there's obviously an opportunity to pick well and then have that serve you in the right way as the years go by. Now, listen, this is important to know. This is the last year of the A's draft order eligibility as it stands. Because with this new collective bargaining agreement, revenue sharing teams like the A's cannot be lottery pick teams for 3 years in a row. So that means no matter what happens, it doesn't matter if they win the World Series next year, or they finish dead last. Doesn't matter. I think the best that they can pick, the highest, would be 10th in 2025, which is a little tough, I think, to deal with. David Force certainly thinks so. He says, and the quote here is, "It makes it harder to do what we're trying to do." That's the A's general manager. Obviously, a big part of rebuilding is rebuilding through the draft, a high pick. Picking that player is flexibility. With a larger pool size, we'll just have to adjust. And he wasn't very happy about the way things worked out, today, of course. how could you? You're the GM. You're getting ready to hopefully take your pick of some of the best players in the country. And I think specifically watching what's going on at Wake Forest, where you've got a couple of players there, definitely a frontline starting pitcher and a first baseman. As colleges go, pretty heavy for the draft from Wake Forest. And I think that David Forst sort of at least put those cards on the table, that given the opportunity to pick there, they might have gone there. Now, whether or not those guys will still be available come pick 4, don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Blackburn and Brown sounds like one of those accident attorneys that are on like every other billboard here in Las Vegas. Well, no, Blackburn and Brown, attorneys at law. No, they're, of course, members of the Oakland A's, Paul Blackburn and Seth Brown. And if you have been paying attention to kind of the hot stove, a lot of people thought that, there aren't a whole lot of chips left in the drawer, but those are 2 that might be able to get you some sort of return. But David Forst, again, kind of put the kibosh to all that. He says he does not expect to trade either Paul Blackburn or Seth Brown this offseason. That's according to John Shea at the Chronicle. So that's kind of good news. I guess I like Paul Blackburn. Of course, he's been the subject of trade speculation as far as like all the way back to July of 2022. But he's been able to hang around, and we like that. And I think, injury-free, he's got to be looking like at least a number 1 or 2 starter, right? I mean, you got J.P. Sears and Paul Blackburn. You kind of build it from there. And you might be saying, no, wait, Wayne, we've got Mason Miller too, Yeah, we do, but there's a catch. Once again, David Forst saying that Mason, because he's been so injury prone throughout his young career, is likely to be headed to the bullpen in 2024. Now, one thing I was thinking about is with his stuff, I don't know a lot of pitchers who throw harder. And certainly he showed that, when he's healthy, he's a strikeout machine. Maybe, just maybe, with Trevor May gone, it could be looking for a closer. We might already have one. Kind of reminds me of the A.J. Puck situation. Remember, A.J. was in the rotation, kept getting hurt, so they put him in the pen, got through, for the most part, unscathed an entire year. Then they were going to move him back into the rotation before they decided to, of course, trade him to the Florida Marlins, where he had a pretty darn good year. But I digress. Anyway, so Mason Miller, if you're looking, at him as being a rotation guy, looking more and more like he's going to be in the bullpen. But you do have Joe Boyle, who impressed a bunch of people, certainly standing in line for a starting nod. Now, Ken Waldichuk has been set back a little bit with an injury. So the A's could be on the prowl for some pitching, and maybe, just maybe, that's where they go. Not so much in the draft, but maybe in a trade situation. Maybe let the big pieces fall first, not like we're in Shohei land here anytime soon, but maybe there's somebody out there that could fill up one of those spots in the rotation. Certainly looks like it's going to be all hands on deck in spring training, and, may the best man win. I think there's going to be a lot of bodies, and we'll see how it all works out. But look for Mason Miller to start the season at least in the bullpen. And again, for the A's, that's an opportunity to hopefully keep him healthy. I remember having a conversation with the folks over at the Aviators, and was told flat out, like, look, the guy's got injury issues. There's no doubt about it. He can pitch. But, I remember Matt Neverett telling me that it's just a question of whether or not he can stay healthy. So let's hope so, because I really like that kid, and I hope he ends up being something for the A's. Well, I know that we come to sports to escape. We just try to get away. That's what it's all about, right? Little R&R. You've worked real hard. You need to sometimes get away from the crazy realities of life. But I want to talk to you just for a minute about preparing for some tough situations. And all serious here, this is something that has happened to me. I've been on extended travel, actually on business trips and on vacations, where I've needed the help of a professional. I've needed a doctor. And, there's been a supply shortage. So found myself out there in the middle of the pandemic without any help whatsoever. That could happen to you. Hopefully not with another pandemic, but thanks to our partners at Jace Medical, life-saving antibiotics can be yours. And that way, when you head out on the road or you're home, maybe you're not feeling so great, unable to get out, your daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply. And don't forget about the Jace case, because that's important too. That is 5 different antibiotics that can treat a whole host of things depending upon what's up with you. If you got a UTI or a respiratory infection or sinusitis, or if you got skin infections, all kinds of things can happen to you. You want to be covered when that happens. That's what the Jace case is all about. You know, they've even got the ED generics for Cialis and for Viagra. If that's something you're looking for, they can take care of you at Jace. Visit jacemedical.com and complete what they call your physician encounter. Definitely going to get personal with you and make sure that you get exactly what you need to take care of you. And you can do that today. Licensed pharmacy, all at a fraction of a regular cost. You ready? Never more important than to get prepared today, so we want to help you out. $20 off your first order. Just go to jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com and use the offer code. It's locked on. And again, you'll get $20 off your order. You're welcome. You like sports as much as I do. You like it 24/7. You like to know that when the stories break, you can find out all about them. Well, of course, Locked On and the Locked On Network, your team every day, have stepped it up. It's the very first 24/7, 365 streaming sports network. So it's not just baseball. It's NFL football. It's NHL, NBA. All of those stories from the Locked On regional reporters like yours truly. And then, of course, the national channels as well, like Locked On MLB, Locked On Prospects, all of that 24/7 at your disposal. Get to YouTube and subscribe there. You want to be part of Locked On Sports Today. It's brand new and kind of record setting, which is pretty cool. Happy to be a part of that on the Locked On Sports Network. Okay, this is kind of something that we thought should have happened already, but it didn't. And then you're thinking, well, of course it didn't, because it's John Fisher, and things just seem to kind of fall into place there, right? Well, what we're talking about is the A's purchased half of the Coliseum property. They bought their half from the county, the other half owned by the city of Oakland. At the time, Dave Kaval said that it was important that they be able to secure that just in case they needed a backup for Howard Terminal. But as you know, Howard Terminal is not happening. Neither is the Coliseum site. The A's have their sights on Las Vegas, and they announced that back in April, actually. That's when Kaval said to the world that the parallel paths were done now, and we're going to focus strictly on Las Vegas. Remember? And then, of course, the legislation, and then after that happened, the money was awarded. $380 million in public funds. Became pretty clear at that point that the A's were intent on moving to Vegas. And yet the Alameda County supervisors still felt like they had never officially heard that. And because of that, there's a clause in the purchase contract that says that the payments that John Fisher would be making on behalf of the A's would be spread out. As long as they were going to stay in Oakland, as long as they hadn't announced they were leaving, all the way up until 2026. Plenty of time, 2024, 2025, 2026. Well, there's a 180-day acceleration clause that kicks in if indeed the A's do announce that they're moving, which I think you knew, pretty sure I knew, but for whatever reason, supervisors, a couple of them, said, well, we don't know this just yet. Never mind that the MLB owners voted 30-0 to approve the relocation request by the Oakland A's. That's not an announcement. I don't know what is. So anyway, the bottom line is, well, again, we're getting back to what you don't expect, something going the other way. Well, David Haubert, who is vice president of the 5-person county Board of Supervisors, former mayor of Dublin, has announced that, yes, indeed, John Fisher is on the clock. 180 days, and they're starting the clock at that announcement that was made by the owners. Remember Rob Manfred saying 30-0? from that point forward. So if you're doing the math, it looks like February is when it'll become due and payable, accelerated. That's $45 million, not 15, 15, and 15 for the next 3 years. 45 now. Write a check. I don't know how that's going to work, but apparently they say now that John Fisher and the A's do indeed owe the $45 million and they need to pay it. So the surprise bill collection, of course, is going to kick into gear. And when it does, you could probably expect that there's going to be a lawsuit, which will probably drag it out a little bit more. But at some point, unless that changes, and I don't see how it could, that amount of money is going to need to be paid sooner rather than later. Again, Hobart saying announcement made. In fact, I said right here on this podcast that I felt like as of April 19th or April 20th, depending on when you got the news, I think that Mr. Cavill and company made it pretty clear that they were no longer interested in staying in Oakland. And as far as I'm concerned, that would have done it. But instead, the supervisors are saying, no, November 16th, that'll be our beginning date. So they're just going to ask for the money. That's basically it. Kind of a landmark moment, according to those who are covering this whole story, they say, in East Bay sports. And it's true, because I can't remember either a political body standing up to a big bad owner. Usually it works the other way, right? I mean, we all went through what we went through with Al Davis and then Mark Davis and, of course, Fisher and the gang for all these years. So, again, it looks like acceleration, and the bill will need to be paid, and John Fisher likely is going to get his legal team involved. I would be shocked if there wasn't some sort of lawsuit to try to, at least, if nothing else, delay this, and we'll see what happens. But the bottom line is, if the A's are leaving, the Coliseum site sitting there certainly needs to be developed. It would be wrong, I think, for John Fisher and the A's to hold the city of Oakland basically at ransom. You left. You didn't want to be here. See ya. Don't let the door hit you in the butt. But at the same time, don't stop the city from being able to develop that property to put it to good use, whether it's for another stadium or something altogether different. But certainly it's prime property right there at 880 and 66th. And you got BART, you got the airport, freeway, all those things that we've talked about before, Amtrak. So I'd like to see it get resolved in a positive way. Now, looking at it this way, I mean, John Fisher not exactly winning in the PR department. Wouldn't it be a noble notion if it looked like indeed the ship is sailing and the A's are actually heading to Vegas? What about, doing the right thing and saying, you know what? We don't need this land anymore. We're not going to be greedy. We're going to move. We're going to get our stadium, and good luck to you, Oakland. Right? Are you holding your breath waiting for that to happen? Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, me either. So we'll be watching. We'll see how that goes. What's interesting is when they decided to do this, sell this thing for $85 million, they said at the time it was worth like 115 to 120, but the county supervisors at that time didn't even go find out what real true market value was. They just fixed a number and sold it. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay. Supervisors, by the way, that were there then, except for one, are all gone. Nate Miley, current president of the board. Oh, I guess Keith Carson also. They were both there then, but that's it, just those two. So we'll be watching to see what happens. The other thing we're watching, of course, is the Rule 5 draft, which happens tomorrow. And this time, there's no lottery, and the A's do indeed have the first pick. So who are they going to grab? Are they going to grab anybody? Now, the Rule 5 rules, first of all, I hadn't realized this, but in some form or another, Rule 5 has been around since like 1892, I think it was, prior to even the first World Series. That's how long some version of this has been around. But basically what it does is it tells the other teams, look, protect the people that you want to protect, and then to be fair and equitable, to keep players from not being able to move along in their careers. We open it up so if other teams are interested, they can get those players, but of course at a cost. And the cost breaks down this way. Make sure I have this right. I want to get this right. A player must either have spent 4 seasons in professional baseball after signing at age 19 or older, or 5 seasons in pro ball after signing at 18 or younger. Okay, as of June 5th of that year, their birthday. Okay, so a team that makes a selection in the Rule 5 draft has to pay the previous team, whoever they are owned by, $100,000. And they have to place that player on their 40-man roster, and then they have to keep the player on their 25-man roster once the season begins for the whole year, either on the 25-man roster or on the injury list. One of the two. Okay, but they have to be active for at least 90 days because otherwise teams could stash them on the injured list for the whole time. If the acquiring team removes the player from the big league roster, well, then it has to offer him back to their former team for $50,000. Now, not necessarily at that amount, but that particular procedure, returned to sender, returned, okay, that is more often than not the way these things shake out. I went back and looked at the A's Rule 5 draft picks all the way from 68, actually 67, before they even moved to Oakland, all the way to now. First of all, haven't been a whole lot of big finds, that's for sure. We'll talk about a couple of them. But most of the time, the result is, hey, good to have you around, but this just didn't work out. So they end up going back to their original team. Okay? Not always, though. Sometimes you do hit pay dirt. In fact, we have some recent examples of that have worked out pretty well. So be thinking about that as we get ready for that draft tomorrow. Is there another Ryan Noda there? That certainly worked out well. The A's selected second Ryan Noda, who ends up being their full-time first baseman. And what a year, 364 on-base percentage, 16 home runs. Not too shabby for a rookie. And he's pretty much looking like he's got first base locked down. Rule 5 draft pick. And prior to that, remember in the offseason of 2014, leading into the 2015 season, this one wasn't quite as smooth as the Ryan Noda pickup. Took a little work. The A's went to the Rockies and said, you're picking before we are. We're very interested in Mark Canha, who's playing for the Marlins. So we'd like you to grab him and take him. And then what we'll do is we'll give you a player that you want from us in exchange. Turned out to be relief pitcher Austin House. So that's how it worked. Rockies get Canha from Florida. We send Austin House to Colorado, and they send us back Mark Canha, who ends up playing for 7 seasons for the A's, and actually was a big part of their postseason success in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Not only that, the guy's a heck of a cook and a natty dresser as well. I miss Mark Canha. I'm not gonna lie. I just loved having him on the team, and it was sad to, see that they weren't going to pay him to be able to keep him around. So, question is, will the A's grab a player or 2 or 3 tomorrow? Now, current rosters, the 40-man is at 39, so there's room. So let's see what they do with it. They got a pick, not just a pick. They got the first pick. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. You like sports? I know you do. How about 24/7, 365? How about the very first streaming network, all sports? It's Locked On Sports Today. What an awesome channel. It's on YouTube. You can subscribe there. Do it, and you'll never miss a beat in terms of all the major sports, covering baseball, of course, plus football, plus basketball, plus hockey. It's all right there for you. And you can find them, again, on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today. That is the nation's first, kind of feels pretty cool, 365, 24/7 streaming sports network. Kind of neat. You know what else is neat? That you made it all the way to this video. Thanks for that. or this podcast if you're listening to us. Appreciate it. Appreciate you spending time with us and making us your first listen every day. How about we do it again tomorrow? We're going to have stuff to talk about. We'll see how the whole Rule 5 thing went, see if there's been any A's reaction to what's happening at the Coliseum site, and a whole lot more. You know, we're on it. That's our job. And of course, happy to be here for you every single day. Thumbs up if you can do that. That helps us spread the channel. So give us that if you can. Subscribe too. That way you don't miss an episode. And of course, we'll be right here again tomorrow. It's your team every day, Locked On A's, and I'm Wayne Coy. Thanks for being around. And until next time, you keep on swinging.